Five stars.
And that's no moon.
Alright, hello and welcome back to another episode of 5 Stars and That's No Moon, a Star Wars podcast by fans and for fans in Singapore. Hello Jet, welcome back.
Hi Asmi, yay! So as you can gather, we don't have a fixed schedule for this show. There probably will be times when there'll be longer gaps between episodes and then shorter gaps between episodes when there's a lot of Star Wars related stuff. But this episode is an interesting one. It's an interesting topic, I think, to Singaporeans. And if you're not Singaporean, would ask you to please stick with us because I think you'll eventually find it interesting as well. Asmi, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about a Singapore drama series revolving around a few teenagers learning about saber combat. Do you think that's an interesting premise to you?
I think that's an interesting premise for a few reasons, right? So, Singapore TV, a lot of Singaporeans are understandably frustrated with Singapore TV. I think there are a lot of reasons why we feel that Singapore TV, especially in the English language, has a certain standard which it doesn't seem to achieve, and there's a lot of frustration with it. I think a lot of that has to do with censorship, also has to do with certain standards that are imposed. And it's frustrating because, there's no shortage of talent in Singapore, but it's just that there's so many limitations that are put on the people who want to go into this industry that they get disillusioned very quickly. But I think there are still people who manage to achieve escape velocity, who manage to create things that can transcend kind of those boundaries. I don't know if Lightspeed is one of those things, but Lightspeed is a show that it's on TV, right? But it's also on MeWatch. You can also watch it online. And I think MediaCorp has even put it on their YouTube channel. So if you want, you can watch, I think, the first several episodes on their YouTube channel. And it is a half-hour format. And I think I would characterize it as a comedy drama, a sports comedy drama. So it's very much following that kind of Karate Kid formula, where there is like a misfit or delinquent at school who suddenly discovers this sport, and there's this like a master with an interesting past who trains him, and he finds purpose, and he has to hide it from his parents and his teachers, and there's kind of a camaraderie that forms. But the sport in this case is specifically saber combat.
Yeah, it's what you said. It's very typical of such a sports martial arts kind of series where some young fellas like really is a troublemaker in school and then like finds purpose and peace in life through such a sport. In this case, saber combat.
Yeah, and in this case, our young troublemaker is a character named Max, played by Marcus Chiao. So he has just moved to a new school. Like, he got kicked out of his previous school for a violent incident where he got upset with these two bullies and then he trashed a science lab. So he was kicked out and now he's in a new school. So in this new school, he meets a bunch of other teenagers. So there's like the kind of stuck-up prefect, Reza, who's played by this actor called Shia Rizwan. They're all like young actors, the four main cast. And then he reconnects with his old friend, Kai, played by Ian Lee, and then the fourth member of the group is a girl named Annabelle, played by Emily Yong. So the four of them are into saber combat, and then their coach, their teacher is this guy who runs a gaming shop. I forgot the character's name, but he's played by Daryl Young. What's he called?
His name is Daniel. His character's name is Daniel.
Daniel, right? Yeah. Played by Daryl Young. With I don't know, is it a wig? I don't know whether it's a wig or not, but it's like this very strange haircut that he has.
I think it's it's a kind of Korean hairstyle kind of thing. I don't know.
Right? Yeah. He also he has the mustache, and he's supposed to look like a bit scruffy, and he is
nerf herder.
Scruffy looking nerf herder, right? He's the mentor who's kind of cool, and you don't expect him to impart life lessons to them, but he eventually does. And then the other characters include the main character's mom, Max's mom, and then the teacher, Is she called Miss Fong, something like that, played by Cheryl
Yeah,
Chow,
yeah. That's I think it's Charlene
and
Fong
yeah,
or something. Yeah,
or Charlene Fong, yeah. So it's mainly like a school setting, and I think they're all 16, so they're all Sec 4. So some of them also have a part-time job, and part of the thing is they're bullies, they're like rival teams, and
and
ask me what,
nobody seems to be concerned
yeah.
about the looming O levels.
No, not at all. Yeah, it is very much they're taking kind of the American school, high school drama formula and putting it into a Singapore system, which has been done like a lot, like Moment High and all of those old kind of Channel 5 TV shows.
Yeah,
They watch a lot of the American high school dramas and try to superimpose that formula onto a Singapore system. So not a lot of things track completely, but it's kind of fun to see the formula of a sports drama with the context of saber combat. And I lost my mind watching the first episode because when you describe this to me and you're like, Jet, you have to watch this, my main question was, does Star Wars exist in the world of Lightspeed? What is the origin of lightsabers? Because as we know, in real life, Star Wars is
yeah,
the origin of lightsabers, right? Like, it's
yes,
kind of
that's right.
interesting in the early concept art, everybody was gonna have a lightsaber. Stormtroopers would have lightsabers, everyone would have lightsabers, and then kind of later on, I think to save cost, still like, all right, we're gonna make lightsabers special. It's a special like Jedi weapon, and yeah, the rest is history, right? The original Luke's lightsaber handle that was a Graflex camera flash holder, and then Obi-Wan's was made from like old World War One grenades, and those were the origins of the very first lightsabers. And since then, Star Wars is something where fans are dedicated to really, really specific components of it. So there are fans who are super, super dedicated to lightsabers, like collecting replicas of lightsabers, building replicas of lightsabers, and then to saber combat. So,
Yeah,
Azmi, you have a little bit of experience, let's say, with saber combat. Can you give us a bit of your background on this sport?
yeah. Even in specific sections of lightsabers, like people, Star Wars fans who are into lightsabers, there are different categories. Like people who collect the replicas, people who do custom sabers, and also people who do saber combat as well as do choreography performances, such as myself. Um, I've been doing lightsaber combat performances since 2005, so that's like about 16 years. Yeah. So
Yeah.
and then the thing is, saber combat, like in different countries have different approaches to it. The Americans do it differently. The Europeans do it differently. The Asians even have their own way of doing things. But most of us can agree that saber combat itself has no structure, a worldly, a global structure, so that everyone is on board and into the same thing at once, which I think is a great thing, because it shows the creativity and individualism from each and every person who is into this kind of thing. Even in the saber combat section, it's usually divided into like the actual combat sport and also the choreography part. Um, I've I have like been involved in like in several martial arts that does sword fighting. I've also like played around with single sticks, fencing kind of environment, and also um, chanbara and all that. Um, I, and I've also actually won a saber combat tournament in Indonesia once upon a time.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yes, this is the place to flex that.
Yeah. So basically, when I watch this series, what interests me is that how is saber combat represented in this series? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the what you said is really true, right? There isn't like a World Karate Council or a World Taekwondo Council that oversees saber combat, and that's also the distinction that you drew was very important between combat sport and choreographed performance, because everything that we see in the Star Wars movies is choreographed performance, and it's born mainly out of British stage combat.
Yes.
And then they also incorporate elements of kendo and things like that. But the origins of Star Wars lightsaber fighting, Bob Anderson was one of the original sword masters, and he was also a
he
sword
was a
master on
fencer.
Lord of the Rings and Pirates of the Caribbean, Zorro. So that tradition is very much in that stage combat tradition. And there's this great saying about musicals, right? Like in a musical, when the characters have no other way to express their emotion and words won't do anymore, that is when they sing and that's when they dance. And in Star Wars, I think lightsaber combat is the equivalent of that, when there's no other way to express. The lightsabers come out and you fight, right? So I think the lightsaber, I always look at the
it's the ultimatum. I will do what I must.
yes, I and then they shrug off the rope. So I always look at lightsaber duels in Star Wars movies as like musical numbers, as like dance numbers. Yeah.
Choreographed fights are the very basics of it is basically a dance, right? The dance between
Yes.
two people or more, two or more
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
I go here, you go here. I do this, you do this, you do this, and then that creates, in the end, performance. But it has to look like it is spontaneous. It has to look like it cannot look too choreographed at the same time, right? And there's
speaking
always
of the choreography,
with any action scene. Yeah, like with any action scene at all, there's a balance that you have to strike where there are some people who do it really, really stylized and some people who do it like they choreograph it to look really, really rough. But I think with lightsaber combat, I always appreciate that element of elegance to it, of like it plays out in a wide shot. The characters just move left to right on the screen, and then I like seeing that. Yeah,
After all, it's an elegant weapon for a more civilized age.
absolutely, not clumsy and random like a blaster.
Speaking of
Yeah.
speaking of choreography, I find that the choreography in the Lightspeed series is that it's actually not bad, considering it's
Yeah.
a Singaporean production, right? Yeah, it's actually quite well. I mean, you can compare it to like some of the high quality Star Wars films out there, the ones
Phantoms, yeah.
with lightsaber combat.
It's really interesting because I think there is a lot of passion that goes into this from certain elements of it. Like I don't know if there is I can say that there's a lot of thought that's put into the writing or the story, but you can tell that when it comes to portraying the lightsaber duels in like especially in the tournament scenes, I think there is care that's put into that. There are people who care about representing that properly. But at the same time, I think the director is Randy Ang, who, if I'm not wrong, he directed this action movie called Resolve that I reviewed years and years ago. And then he directed 1965, which is a Singapore historical movie that was set during like the independence of Singapore. Not a very good movie, but I mean, it's all sort of the same. It's a very, very small industry, right? The stunt coordinator is this guy called Yang Guang, who works on absolutely everything. Like if you look at the credits, you just recognize a lot of names if you're familiar with the local Singapore industry. But it's always nice to see kind of like fresh faces. The actors who play the teenagers are actually young. They're actually in their teens or like early 20s. And honestly, like I think most of the characters are quite standard. They are reasonably likable. I guess they can be a little bit annoying in the way that like YA protagonists are annoying. But to me, the most interesting thing about this is, of course, where do lightsabers come from in this world? Because in this world, there's no mention made of Star Wars. When they describe saber combat, they say, think fencing meets kendo. All right, where then the blades light up? What's that?
Exactly. I mean, obviously, right? They cannot like mention Star Wars because they don't have the licenses or the permission to use the words or the IP. So,
but that's interesting to me, right? Because like let's say there are Star Wars references in Friends, right? Because then there's NBC need to go and get clearance from at the time Fox to say Star Wars or to have like Jennifer Aniston wear Leia's bikini in the series. Like where does that come from? Where do you draw the line between this is a normal reference? Because in real life, when we talk to our friends, we do make cultural references. We do make pop cultural references. I mean, think of something like, let's say, Big Bang Theory, where every episode is just filled with all of these pop culture references. Does that mean that there's a legal team that has to clear all of this? And then could there have been a similar process with Lightspeed? Because then the alternative is, like, I love the gag and Community where there's a show called Doctor Space Time, which is their parody of Doctor Who. So and then I think Doctor Who also exists in the universe. Doctor Space Time is just like kind of the knockoff or the rival. So the whole time I was watching Lightspeed, I just couldn't stop thinking of what would have taken the place of Star Wars in this world, and how different is this world with no Star Wars?
Because in Lightspeed, there's a game that all the kids play. It's called Infinity Takedown, right? So is this like the Star Wars adjacent kind of thing? The replacement for Star Wars?
They don't really go into that, right? Because Infinity Takedown is kind of like, I think, their Fortnite or Overwatch or something like that, right? It is.
I mean, it most probably might have like sabers in the game. I mean, like, obviously it's probably too much work for the producers to develop that Infinity Takedown backstory even more, right?
Yes, that's what I would have wanted to do. If I were working on this, I'd be like, please let me write the fictional history of Infinity Takedown that originated in 1977.
Not everyone is Tolkien.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, but that's an interesting element of this, because once you remove the whole idea of saber combat's roots in the specificity of Star Wars, of popular culture, but specifically Star Wars, then it's kind of like presented as, oh, this is pretty much just another sport. It's like funky fencing is kind of how it's treated in the world of the show, because there are characters who are like former fencing team members, and then they were like, oh, for some reason or another they quit fencing and then they moved into saber combat. But where does saber combat come from is the big question, and to me that is the fun thing about exploring that in a show. And they completely don't do that. They completely don't do kind of like the origins of saber combat and how people get into it. Because I mean, even something like Fanboys, right, was a lot about the relationship that Star Wars fans have to Star Wars and how the impact that it has on their lives. And and like, Star Wars is so iconic that specific elements, you show someone a lightsaber and there's the buzzing sound of when it ignites, everyone knows that. Yeah. Even if they're not a Star Wars fan, they know where that is from. And it's kind of funny because in this show they have like knockoff sound effects. They have like the clashes, and then the ignition sounds are a little bit different from a real Star Wars like Ben Burt noise, but it's recognizable enough that that's what they're going for. So to me, all of these things were so funny. And there's a scene in one of the earlier episodes where they go to a sabersmith, right? They go to a guy who fabricates the custom lightsabers. Yeah. And
interestingly, I want to talk about that scene. It's about
yes.
They basically filmed the whole sabersmith thing at Sabermech's offices. So that's where actually Sabermech does all their sabers, and yeah, and you can actually see some of the branding in some of the shots. And
that's so wild, right? Because it's a real thing. Sabermech is a real company that does custom lightsabers, very well regarded homegrown company that has a lot of fans around the world of their products. And yet Sabermech obviously wouldn't exist without Star Wars. And there's, in that scene where the sabersmith is talking to the kids and talking about making Max's first lightsaber, in the background there's a display cabinet with a lot of replica props that presumably this workshop has also made, including Loki's scepter, right, the Iron Man gauntlet, and a bunch of other MCU kind of things in the background. So
probably MCU exists in this universe, but
right,
Spider-Man
in the MCU
doesn't reference Star Wars.
So I was like, I couldn't concentrate because my brain was just doing celebrity paradox cartwheels the whole time. And it's really interesting because at one point the sabersmith literally says he makes pieces for collectors. Collectors of what? What?
I mean, why?
What are you collecting if Star Wars doesn't exist?
Why do these people collect sabers in the first place? Do they have
if it
a reason?
Doesn't mean anything, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, do these people
because
like?
It's like
okay, let's say Infinity Takedown is a Star Wars replacement.
Yes, yeah.
So these games are like what are played by people from ages 9 to what 60.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird, right? Because Infinity Takedown is it's implied that it's like a massively multiplayer online role playing game. That it is like a Warcraft or something like that, and then it has elements of Fortnite or Overwatch, like it has like the action element in it as well. But they don't really talk about Infinity Takedown. You see a poster of it, and you see them kind of reference it, and Infinity Takedown is the sponsor of the tournament, but they never really discuss the characters of Infinity Takedown. They're not talking about like, oh, there's a limited season event, I want to get this skin, there's this drop box, this gacha that I'm trying to get. They don't talk about it. So the thing that is interesting for me is that the pop culture element is so removed from the sport element. And then it just becomes like any other sports drama rather than focusing on, obviously, even if you can't say Star Wars, focusing on the pop culture component of saber combat. That people are doing something that wouldn't exist without Star Wars,
Yeah, I mean, like even the tournament itself is really it's a bit weird. Infinity Takedown is the main sponsor of the event, and then you see
Yes.
these random cosplayers who are presumably cosplaying characters from Infinity Takedown, but it's basically run of the mill made anime made costumes that you
Yeah,
see
like cat girl costumes,
that you see at the normal anime
cat
conventions.
girls, yeah.
So I wonder what
And, yeah.
what is the deal with this Infinity Takedown and how does it link with saber combat? It still
Yes,
doesn't
the whole
answer
time I was
this
watching
question.
the whole time I was watching the series, I felt like Charlie Day in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, going like Pepe Silver, that famous gif where he's standing in front of the conspiracy theory board with the red string. Because to me, it's like, yeah, once you go into this, like, there's no world building, but world building is the one thing that will set this apart from any other show. And world building is such an important component to Star Wars. And to me, like, I love the meta element of how there is a mythology to the Star Wars fandom. There's not only a mythology to Star Wars in universe, but there's a mythology to how Star Wars became a global phenomenon, the different ways in which fans interact with it and assert or express their love for Star Wars, and of course, lightsaber combat or choreographed performance or lightsaber custom crafting and collection. That is one of those areas. So it is so interesting to me that this exists in a world where you can't say that Star Wars exists.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to see the process of making that decision of finally one day in MediaCorp when they're like, no, we can't actually say Star Wars exists.
We have no money for that. Credits will do fine. No, only money.
Yeah, only money. No, it'll be hilarious if they walk past a sandcrawler. And it's like,
What?
the sandcrawler can't exist.
What I
Yeah.
really think is that basically saber combat is basically just a lower tier of like fencing, because most of these guys are fencing enthusiasts or fencing competitors. Even the sensei person Daniel and his mentor is also a fencer who died.
Yeah, that's his backstory.
In the backstory, yeah, and the teacher of the kids, who, I mean, like when I watched it, it feels like they were they were in a relationship prior to this, and then there's like, and both of them probably met during fencing classes or fencing training, and then now they're like grown apart, star-crossed lovers or whatever.
Yeah, so that's your sort of melodramatic romance element to it, is that the school teacher and the lightsaber combat coach / gaming shop proprietor, they had a thing going on, and then something happened when they were in the fencing team, something happened with their friend, that kind of split the group apart. So there are a total of 10 episodes. We have watched 8. So there are 2 more episodes.
The finale.
And each episode is half an hour. Yeah, wow, the watch party. No, I mean, that's the thing, right? The thing is that if you go onto MeWatch, which is the streaming platform of Channel 5 or MediaCorp, not just Channel 5, but like all the MediaCorp channels, right? So you have a Santam Channel 8. Like, you can see so many shows that they have commissioned that are not created in-house by MediaCorp, but are created by external production companies in Singapore under the MediaCorp license. And all of these shows, like, you've never heard of any of them before in your life. Like, what is Paddles Up? What is Maisonette? All these random, and apparently people had to work on them. People got paid. There were writers, there were actors, there were crew. But it just quietly appears on this streaming platform and no one talks about it. And I don't know what the purpose of that is, because buried somewhere in there could be a really good show. And like last year, I was always going on and on about this show called Chloe, which was commissioned by MediaCorp but was created by Jewel Productions, which I really enjoyed. I think that was a really good show, especially by Singapore standards, because it was kind of edgy, it was funny, it was self-aware. The premise is it's about a social media influencer who murders like a sexual predator kind of guy, an actor, and then she has to cover it up. And then there's an investigative journalist who is on her trail. So there's a bit of like American Psycho to it. There's a little bit of like, she's a sociopath. She turns to the camera and there's a direct address like House of Cards. And then, but it's also a parody of the Singapore entertainment industry. There's like a stand-in for Jack Neo, and like he makes Jack Neo type movies, that kind of thing. So there's stuff like that that is interesting. There's stuff like that that is out there. But nobody's really going to discover it. And I would not have heard of Lightspeed if not for Azmi telling me, Jet, you have to watch the show,
No, actually, it wasn't me who actually first discovered it. It was actually our mutual friend Arvin. I was like, hey, have you heard of this show? Are you involved in any way? I was like, nope, I've not heard it. I'm not involved in any way.
Even before we get the cast list, right, in the credits, there's this list of people from something called Saber Authority. What is Saber Authority?
Saber Authority purports itself as a purveyor of saber combat and lightsabers in Singapore. They actually have classes every week that teach you how to duel with lightsabers, but in my honest opinion, it's basically Filipino martial arts with glow sticks.
Is Eskrima Filipino martial arts?
Yes, I think it's basically Kali and Eskrima pieced together. Yeah, with lightsabers basically. So it's fine and all that. Actually somebody on Reddit years ago was like started a thread that says that Saber Authority is claiming what is falsely claiming what it is. It's like teaching real lightsaber combat or real martial arts with lightsabers, but I think there were a few detractors to that group. But I'm not here to dive into that. That's a story that we can like discuss privately. I don't want. It's obviously cool that people join them for the lightsabers or otherwise. They also have they hold regular tournaments every year, but they only have like a single style. Basically, if you are an outsider and you probably like learn kendo or learn fencing, you can't actually join the tournament. So you have to be like a paying member of the group, and you come to classes, and then you have to like make a playoff for the tournament or something like that. So
right, yeah. So
yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm assuming that the producer of Lightspeed is a student of Saber Authority, and that's why they brought Saber Authority in as probably like a consultant kind of thing to show how saber combat classes are conducted and saber tournaments are conducted and all that. Yeah.
So to me, it is very interesting that they are credited even before the cast is credited. So that means that they have some sort of maybe even creative involvement in the show. But I am a Star Wars fan, and I am somewhat active in the Singapore Star Wars fan community. But this is really like a corner of it that I'm completely not familiar with. And I think like there may be people who are confused, like what is the difference between Saber Authority and Fight Saber, which is your organization. So could you kind of like lay out what are some of the differences?
Yeah, the main difference is that Fight Saber is a choreography group. So we
Performance.
we perform whatever that we rehearsed many times during training and all that, and we also have costumes on. So basically we are, I would say, 100% immersed in the. Basically, we put ourselves in the Star Wars universe and imagine ourselves as a character in the Star Wars universe, and then we have storylines and all that, and we it's basically a theatrical play, but with lightsabers.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen many performances that you've done, and you have like soundtracks, you have pre-recorded scripts and dialogue, and so when someone watches a Fight Saber performance, they are kind of watching a duel, and then there's a little bit of plot. There's a little bit of like, oh, who is on the Jedi side, who's on the Sith side, and then I've seen some where there's even like betrayal, suddenly the Jedi stabs the other Jedi in the back. It's kind of exciting. It's a lot of fun. And I think, but of course, the difficulty of it is that because this is live, you don't have special effects like Star Wars, like movies have. You can't do triple, quadruple backflips in midair. You can't like use the Force and hold someone, levitate somebody. So you have all of that has to be done like a theatrical production, like what you said. And I mean that's the thing that is interesting is the element of what is sport and what is performance, and certainly the lines can blur, and certainly there are things like rhythmic gymnastics, right, or synchronized swimming, or things like that are sport that has a very high performance component to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, like in Singapore itself, there's like different like components to the lightsaber thing. We have ourselves, the performers, and then we have Saber Authority, the saber combat sport, and then we have the saber fit, like aerobics with lightsabers, I think. Yeah.
Right, yeah, like Zumba class.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting. I mean, recently, I mean, like the past couple of years, the French Fencing Federation has recognized saber combat as part of their fencing sport. So that means in France, you can like participate in tournaments and all that, and you can have like a national champion. So basically, they the French clubs, the French saber combat clubs. They basically modeled their classes after after fencing classes, actual fencing classes. So they've developed their own curriculum and standards and all that. Interestingly, in the neighboring Italy, they also have their own lightsaber combat academy. They call Ludosport. It started like many years ago, even earlier than the French saber clubs.
And Ludo means light, right?
I think Ludo means play.
Play.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Or game or something like that, if I'm not wrong.
Yes. That's right. Yeah.
So basically, the difference between Saber Authority and the French saber combat classes and Ludosport is basically the curriculum. Saber Authority's curriculum is revolves around Filipino martial arts. The French clubs, the curriculum mainly revolves around the different styles of fencing, the épée, foil, and saber. And
right, yeah.
And Ludosport is probably like the closest thing you can get to like an actual lightsaber academy. Like they actually teach you the different. I've seen their curriculum. I've been to Rome and met with them once, and I've attended their classes once.
Nice.
They actually have like different all the different forms, but which they develop themselves, like Form 1 to 6. Makashi, Soresu, and all that, but they develop it in their own style. So when it comes to like, so they also have tournaments every year. So when it comes to tournaments, so when the students basically they start off with Form 1 and then they branch out into the different forms. You can obviously only like follow one or two forms because it's totally
Yeah.
different. The forms are totally different from each other. So during the tournaments, you can see the different types of forms clashing against each other, and they have like so the way they score points is that you have to use certain moves from your own forms. If not, it doesn't count. Yeah.
So the referees or the judges have to also be well versed in all the
Yes,
different forms to
exactly.
recognize. That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, in universe there are, like you said, the different forms have names. Like the only one that I can name is Vapad, which Mace Windu uses. But and that's kind of like the dangerous form, right? That brings you close to the dark side. But that's one of the things that's fun about Star Wars is the mythology has a lot of layers to it, and the Jedi organization being like a religious kind of organization, there is an element of almost like Shaolin monks to it as well,
Yep.
where combat is like part of the discipline of the religion, and there is a kind of formality to it. So I think that formality does attract people to the idea of what if we had it as a structured sport in real life.
So yeah, but I mean, coming back to the local setting, Saber Authority, they are what you see in Lightspeed, the tournament is basically what Saber Authority does at the tournament. So they can only score by hitting the opponent's hands or the head. Yeah, but other than that, that's where the similarity ends between the Lightspeed
Yeah.
universe and Saber Authority. In the Lightspeed universe, I can see that they don't particularly like use only Filipino martial arts style. I can see like several like Kenjutsu style. You can see like Max in the tournament. He like so-called sheath his lightsaber and then like starts attacking once he
This
unsheathes
is an
his
illegal
saber.
move, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean like so basically I think what Lightspeed does is basically what every other saber combat enthusiast does. So basically mesh every single martial arts out there and then come up with their own style.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because, we think of uh, certain traditional martial arts, but there are a lot of modern martial arts that are created. There's stuff like the Casey fighting method or things like, I mean, that's what mixed martial arts is, right? They're combining different martial arts. And then things like gun kata, which was invented by Kurt Wimmer, the director
Oh, yes.
of Equilibrium.
I love
Yeah.
that movie.
So it's kind of interesting because like that incorporates the guns into the hand-to-hand combat where they just kind of like slap the guns out of each other's hands. And I think that is something which I'm always fascinated by the influence of popular culture on this sort of stuff. I mean, I always say that in the year 2012, we probably saw a record number of kids signing up for archery class because of
Legolas.
Brave, because of Hawkeye and Avengers, and because of Hunger Games that same year.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, in the year 2012, right? And I think that is to me the most like overall. I find Lightspeed a very charming show. As a film critic, I have to say like it does skew younger. I think it is meant for like teenagers. Since it does depict the main characters are teenagers. I don't think it's meant for old people like me.
You're not
Because,
that
like,
old,
it-
Jed.
Oh yeah, I guess not. It is a little bit corny, it's a little bit silly, and it faces a lot of the same problems that a lot of Singaporean TV faces. Like, I just don't know why acting looks like that, in Singapore TV. Like, my mom saw me watching the show and she asked me, "Was this a rehearsal or is this real?" I said, "Oh no, it's not a rehearsal. I'm watching the actual show," and it's so frustrating because I'm sure that. Yeah, I always say there are a lot of talented people in Singapore. I have a passing familiarity with the Singapore art scene. I'm friends with some people who are very involved in it, but it just feels like all the time opportunities aren't really given to the people who do deserve them, and things kind of stagnate. They get stuck, and it sort of stays at the level. So, like, Lightspeed is not a horrible show by any stretch of the imagination, and it is far from the worst like local production that I've seen. But it is very frustrating in the sense that, as a Star Wars fan, I am looking for the Star Wars connection, And in one of the tournament scenes, the commentator says they're moving so fast, they're moving at light speed, and then
Roll credits.
And then it's like, yeah, but no, that's not what lightspeed means in Star Wars, right? In Star Wars, lightspeed is when you go into hyperspace. So it's so interesting, the phenomenon of the connection is there but not there. So that drove me crazy watching. Just why? Then what is there in place of Star Wars? The world. Imagine a world without Star Wars, right? Just how different the landscape of filmmaking, of storytelling, of pop culture.
I wouldn't want to live in that world with no Star Wars,
Exactly, right? And it's so interesting to see how.
Heck, I don't even want to live in the MCU universe because there's only the original trilogy. Where would we get the prequel memes?
Apparently, the prequels don't exist because Samuel L. Jackson is in there and Natalie Portman is in there, and nobody kind of recognizes them, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, that is very interesting. No, I love the celebrity paradox kind of thing. It happens a lot with Star Wars because Star Wars is so prevalent, and a lot of actors from Star Wars will appear in other shows that do reference Star Wars. Like, one of my favorite things is in the beginning of the 2014 Godzilla, you see the kid playing with a Lego snowspeeder. And the 2014 Godzilla is directed by Gareth Edwards, who went on to direct Rogue One.
It's interesting. Basically, Star Wars shaped popular culture around the world since 1977.
Yeah, and I mean, I love kind of telling people this. I work part-time now at Art Science Museum, and sometimes I'm posted to Star Wars Identities. Star Wars Identities has been extended until 27th June, just a little bit of a plug, but that's still very soon. It's still ending very soon. So I signed up to work at that exhibit, but I'm not there all of the time.
Yeah.
So my favorite thing to do is to tell everyone that Qui-Gon's comlink is literally a Gillette Sensor XL woman's razor painted silver, and you sort of see the disbelief on people's faces, at least the upper half of their faces, because they're wearing masks, right? As they register the fact that this huge budget movie, someone ran around the corner to the CVS and bought a razor and spray painted it silver, and that's what Liam Neeson is talking into through the whole thing. And I love things like that. I love all the little bits and pieces of behind the scenes ephemera of Star Wars, and just the element of lightsabers alone is so fascinating. I can see why people are so dedicated to it and why there's so many, as you said, even different sections of fandom specifically about lightsabers. And there's the lore of kyber crystals, of why are Sith lightsabers red. It's because it's artificial, they are bleeding, the kyber, the kind of thing. So all of this little bits and pieces, just one component of Star Wars, already there's so much stuff to it. So that's one thing that I find, there's such a richness to Star Wars, you could never exhaust it. I've been a fan of Star Wars for almost 20 years, and there are huge sections of stuff that I'm completely unfamiliar with, So to me, the fact that Lightspeed takes place in a world with no Star Wars and is about lightsabers is the best thing. I will not get over this.
The only good thing in a world with no Star Wars is that there are no Killicks.
We are trying to make Killicks happen.
No, never.
This is the first time you've heard of Killicks, please go to Wikipedia and have fun with the Darkness saga. Go read all the books, and
Yeah. Okay. One more thing I want to say is that the lightsabers in Lightspeed basically produced by Sabermech, our local saber makers. You should, if you would like a lightsaber for yourself, then please go and give them a shout. Yeah,
they look really, really good.
Yeah,
they look beautiful. Yeah,
especially with newer technologies, you can have multiple color blades. You can have different sound fonts, whatever you want. You can even have Gundam light sword sounds.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that the original technology that was used to create the lightsaber glowing effect in the old movies was, they literally wrapped it in
Yeah.
like screen material, and there was a motor that spun it around, and they
Yes.
shone a light at it.
And then in the prequels, they just use a metal rod, and then they rotoscope the colors in. And then
Yes.
and then when it comes to the sequels, it's actually the producers actually use fans' knowledge, and actually the lightsabers that you see on screen are actually real working lightsabers, like that you see like in Lightspeed or the ones that we use. Obviously, and it's actually made by one of the custom lightsaber makers in the US.
Yeah, I mean that's really really cool, right? Because the thing is, as much as people are down on the sequels obviously they draw on a lot of the knowledge of fans. Like the R2D2 robot makers for the sequels are lifelong
Yeah.
like makers of astromech droids, hobbyists, and they were drawn into it. And yeah, like especially Force Awakens, there's so much of an element of interactive lighting, of the light from the sabers reflecting on the faces of the
Yeah.
actors, which
That's basically come from the lightsabers itself. Yeah.
yes, that's right. That
mean,
only
like-
happens if the lightsabers are producing the interactive
Yeah,
light.
I mean, like in the prequels, you see that there's some color shading on their faces, but it's actually come from a different light source, not from the lightsabers
yeah, it's
themselves.
not from
yeah.
the sword.
Yeah.
Like, and yeah, and my other favorite thing is that George Lucas insists on calling them laser swords. George, call them lightsabers. You invented them, George. Come on.
I mean, there's not even a mention of laser sword in Lightspeed as well, if I remember correctly. Am I right?
Yeah, they call it like torchlight. They kind of like refer to it. Is that this is a very expensive torchlight.
The thing is, the newer lightsaber technology is that most of them are not torchlights anymore. It's basically a strip of LED running through the blades.
Right. Yeah. That's
when
that's what it is, right?
When you take it out from the blade, it's basically just a floppy string of LEDs attached to your lightsaber hilt. And
yeah, I'm imagining that.
Yeah,
that
and
kind of
and
string
that's-
of pearls configuration from the rock of the VX gas.
and that's what the lightsabers that the characters in Lightspeed use, the one with the string LEDs, and not the torchlight kind that we used to use back in the day.
As kids, right? The Hasbro, that. Right, I had like the episode 2 or episode 1 Hasbro telescoping lightsaber where you turn the light on in the base.
Yeah,
and the handle was huge like that. Yeah,
I still have a few of them.
So-
In fact, some of my older performance lightsabers are also like in hilt LED, basically a torchlight attached with a plastic tube to it. Yeah.
Right, yeah, rather than it running through the length of it. I mean, you see, there's so much to talk about with this, so I think it is such an interesting idea that there exists a show built around saber combat that, once again, in case you missed it, Star Wars doesn't exist within that world. So, I've only mentioned it a couple of times throughout this episode. But yeah, I would encourage you, if you have access to MeWatch, which I think everyone kind of does. I mean, they put episodes on YouTube, to check it out, have a look at it, and see why I'm so fascinated by this idea. Because on paper, it is a sports drama. It is Karate Kid, kind of thing. But then you cannot divorce lightsabers from Star Wars, and yet the show does that. So that's what keeps me going, every single time like some of the hosts of lightsaber talks about a lightsaber, it's like, where do lightsabers come from? It's like, mommy, daddy, where do babies come from? It's like, we can't have this conversation right now. So yeah, that's how I feel watching Lightspeed. So thanks again to you and to Aravind for bringing this to my attention. And support local and
No
stuff.
thanks,
I
Aravind.
think-
No thanks.
Yeah, I think it's another reminder of how frustrating it is for anyone who's making media in Singapore, that there is such a ceiling and it seems so hard to break the ceiling. But this is really a very harmless, kind of cute, entertaining show, and if you have younger kids, you can watch it with them as well. I think it's kind of a lot of fun.
Yeah, so if you wanna know more about lightsaber combat and performances, you can obviously reach out to Fight Saber Singapore. You can find them on Facebook, Fight Saber Singapore. Yeah. So and then if you like costuming, if you like lightsabers and you like performing, then you can actually join us.
Yeah, watch some of the Fight Saber performances on YouTube. Go have a look at those.
Yeah.
Because you've done so many at so many events, and a lot of them have been filmed, and it's really a lot of fun. I always like seeing it live. Whenever I'm at Singapore Comic Convention or one of the Star Wars Day events, I'll always make it a point to show up for the Fight Saber performances.
Yeah, and also, Fight Saber usually when we do these kind of shows, we after that we have like a Jedi Academy for kids where we teach small children how to wield lightsabers and then kill other younglings.
Yeah, you always have to keep your Anakin away from Master Skywalker. There's too many of them. What are we going to do?
A fun fact is that every time we have the Jedi Academy at like say Star Wars Day, and then there usually are like lightsabers by Hasbro being sold at the event, right? And every time we have Jedi Academy, that's when the lightsabers get sold out every time.
Hasbro should give you guys a cut. They should give you like a little bit on the top, little bit commission for moving those lightsabers for them. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to this episode of 5 Stars and That's No Moon. This is kind of the perfect topic, I think, like this specificity of a Singapore-related Star Wars thing that also has nothing to do with Star Wars. That is so weird. And, normally we'd be talking about Bad Batch and Kenobi and the standard kind of Star Wars things, but this is such an interesting topic, I find. So hopefully you've enjoyed listening to us talk about Lightspeed, and especially enjoyed listening to Azmi relate his experiences as, the founder of Fight Saber, and the experiences of people in the Singapore Star Wars fan community who are focused on lightsabers in the different forms.
Thank you, Jed, for coming on, and we'll see you guys next time. May the Force be with you.
You're welcome. May the Force be with you all.
Bye.
5 stars.
And that's no moon.